All right. Good morning, everyone. We're learning Likuti Torah. It's a book written by the first Rebbe of Chabad about 250 years ago, explaining ideas in the Torah according to Kabalistic principles and Hasidic principles, and how to activate our soul to serve the creator of the universe and do what God wants to make this world new. What does God want? To make this world a perfect place, to make this world at least a little bit better place. And that is done by means of us making ourselves into a holy temple. The holy temple was the example of what the whole world is going to be like in the future through Moshiach, to perfect this physical world so that everyone will be able to serve the creator who's creating us. Something like what Moses did when he took the Jews out of Egypt, but infinitely more so. And there's going to be also infinitely greater miracles, even though there doesn't have to be, but there will be. And first of all, the first miracle we have to do is change ourselves. That was one thing that was not accomplished when Moses took the Jews out of Egypt. God did everything. The Jews did not change themselves. He split the sea. He destroyed the enemies. He gave us the Torah. He fed us. He gave us the drink. God did everything. And so as a result, the Jews really never internalized any of this. They never really did any of their own work. And as soon as there came the first sort of challenges and difficulties, like with the golden calf and etc., and they thought Moses wasn't there, or even when they got to the sea 7 days after they left Egypt, they wanted to go back. So now the idea of Chassidut is to correct that, so that we will serve God from ourselves, and we will do the work, and we will be able to withstand challenges, and even more to transform challenges and to transform the whole entire world. The whole world will be like a holy temple, and that God, we're relying on God to do everything to fix us. God can fix up everything, but he can't fix up a Jew. Can't do it. The Jewish people are the rock that God cannot move. If they decide they want to serve God, then nothing in the world can stop them. Like Abraham, had every terrible thing happen to him. Abraham, Isaac, all these terrible things happened to him, and nevertheless he still served God. He was alone, Abraham. And nevertheless, he still served God no matter what. God put him through 10 tests. And on the other hand, the Jews that were in the first temple, God gave them everything you could probably want, and they still refused to serve God. So go and understand that. Or you can't understand it. So ideally, what it should be is that we have both. On one hand, God gives us everything, and nevertheless, we still have that same drive and craziness. 1 second. To serve God like Abraham did. We could have all the benefits and the revelation of God like it was in the time of the first temple, and all the Jews were together on the land, and it was a Medinat Halacha and all these other things. But at the same time, we should have the same devotion as Abraham. How are we going to get that? Well, the first part, God's going to take care of. But the second part, we have to take care of, and that's the idea of Chassidut, namely to serve God like Abraham did. Not paying attention to how bad or how good the world is, to serve the Creator, to make the world improve. You can always improve the world, no matter how good it is. You can always make it better. What's the proof? When it was in the time of the first temple, when everything was just great, nevertheless, it required a tremendous improvement in the Jews. And when they didn't improve, how do you say, when you don't move up, so you fall down? So says the Rebbe, that's the whole idea of putting salt on the sacrifices. Sacrifice means to come close. Korban litkarev. Everybody has to try to come close to God and make the world around you close to God. And that's by having the proper attitude and doing the proper deeds and we're saying the proper words and thinking the proper thoughts, right? Not easy, but that's our job. And that's in our ability. And it's our, how do you say, our blessing that we can do it. There's a better word for it. I can't think. All of a sudden, the word jumped from my mind. And so we can that's so that we can serve we can make the world a better place. That's the idea of the salt. What's the idea of the salt? In the sacrifices, every sacrifice that you brought in the temple, you had to bring salt. Privilege. Oh, that's the word I want. It's our privilege. Oh. So every sacrifice there was in the Holy Temple, you had to bring salt. That's what it says. Lo tashbit melech. You had to bring salt. So what's the idea of bringing salt? What do you have to bring salt for? It says salt is a very strange creation of God. Salt. On one hand, salt, when you put salt on your food, it makes everything tasty. But if you taste salt alone, it's not tasty at all. Unless you like the taste of salt. There's all sorts of people in the world, but very few people like the taste of salt. When you put salt on something, it makes it taste good. And sometimes it even makes it edible by putting salt on it. So he says, why? Because salt has a very high source in holiness, and that's why it has to be on every sacrifice. Salt has the ability of making something bitter, sweet. It can change things around, makes things active. We're going to see later on that salt has these two different abilities. On one hand, it can get rid of the bad, like it put on salt on blood, it pulls out the blood, and the blood is not good. But on the other hand, salt makes things sweet and good, to the point where it says that God made a covenant, an eternal covenant of salt with the Jewish people, Brit Melach Olam, with the Jewish people, an eternal covenant, just like salt never rots. So also, or whatever changes. So therefore, same thing with the Jews, but it's more. Salt is not just a how do you say, benign, there's a better word for it. Okay, a static substance. That when you put it on something, it makes it change. So it says, why? Because this is where we got up to last time. It says, because spiritually, salt comes from, ready everyone? Botsina de Cardanuta. Huh? Botsina de Cardanuta means the flame of darkness. A flame of darkness. Here, let's do it from here. The Shoresh Bechinat Melach, the source of this idea of salt, and the Rebbe is going to say that that's the secrets of the Torah, Chassidut, Kabbalah. That's going to be the salt. You're going to see. Salt, what is the source of salt? How has it got the power to be bitter, but it also can sweeten up meat and things like this? How? It says, because the source of this salt, and this we have to find this in our personality and put it on our sacrifice. Sacrifice, like we said, means korban, to come close to God, korov. You want to come close to God, you have to have salt. What does it mean? They even say it in English, right? A salty old man, a salty, right? He's a salty means he's like interesting because he's experienced. Melach, the source of salt, according to Kabbalah, and Kabbalah is talking about how the Creator creates things, right? The whole system of creation. That's what Kabbalah is talking about. What's on the inside of the creation? What's on the inside of the Torah? What's on the inside of the commandments? The source of the salt is botzina de kardanusa, the flame, the dark flame. Shu bechinas kav amida, that this is what's called the measuring stick. What do you think about that? Measuring stick. What does this mean? Just in a very short way, God creates the world, right? So he creates the world. Let's go back to the beginning when God created the world. According to Judaism, God started creating the world. He started creating time. He started creating being. Like we said so many times before, God doesn't really exist in any way. God certainly affects the world. God creates all existence. God is infinitely more real than any kind of existence we can possibly imagine. According to Judaism, God existed before the world was created, before there was nothingness, before there was vacuumness, whatever you want to call it. And it's the same God now. God created the world from nothing, which means the world is made from nothing. So it doesn't change God. So as though the world is really nothing. But on the other hand, here's the world. And the Torah tells us that there's a world. So the whole world is this incredible miracle. And God is creating it all the time. And he's creating it according to the same principles. You want to call it the laws of nature, the laws of Kabbalah, right? The Kabbalistic principles in the upper worlds, the laws of nature in the physical world. Everything goes according to a certain. Why do things go according to these laws of creation? Why is it that people have two eyes in their head? Why not one eye and two noses? Why? Everyone's born. God forbid a person's child, you have a child, he's got two, a beautiful child, and one problem, he's got one eye and two noses, right? So, okay, some people have like that. Some people, it's no problem. What are you talking about? Man has two eyes and one nose. That's why it is. How does it go that way? It's just because God has it that way. That's the form of God. We're created in God's image. Oh, so God has an image? No, God forbid, God doesn't have an image. It's ridiculous. That's heresy. But it says in the Torah that God has an image. Of course he has an image. What are you talking about? Of course there is an image. So God doesn't have an image? What are you talking about? So it doesn't make any sense. On one hand, that God is above being infinite. God creates infinity. And on the other hand, God creates infinity according to his image. He doesn't have an image. So that's the idea of Kabbalah. The idea of Kabbalah is dealing with the impossible. On one hand, we have a world, and God is creating the world, and he's creating the world according to certain principles. But on the other hand, God is infinite, and these principles are also infinite. And when it comes down to it, the world is also must be infinite because it's not separate from God. So what's this whole business? How does it work? So it says there's what's called kav hamida. God has this, what do you call it, the measuring stick. The measuring principles of measuring. When God wants a builder, he has to have a measuring stick to stick. So this is this botzin of the kardanusa. On one hand, it's light. On the other hand, it's darkness. It's the proper measurement of limit and unlimit. Right? God creates the world. It's about amazing kindness, amazing love. God creates the world free, gives us world, gives us life. On the other hand, he creates everything exactly right, exactly according to laws. And some people get so involved in the laws that they forget about the miracle. Some people get so involved in the miracle, they forget about the laws. There has to be both. Right? Some people say, just give yourself over to the Lord and he will take care of you, and throw yourself away. I say to you, you should not have any possessions. You cannot get any of it. That's sick. That's really sick. That's certainly not Judaism. On the other hand, to say that there's no God, all there are the laws, here are the laws, I got the whole thing figured out. That's a sickness on the other way. There has to be somehow or other a blending of both of them, a mixing of both of them. That's going to be the thing of the salt. Okay, that's the salt is this botzin of the kardanusa. This is that measures everything so that there's the proper measure of botzina, light, and kardanusa, and darkness. This measures kolam shachot, all of the lights and the vessels that God creates, eich v'kama yumshach, how it's going to be drawn down. And therefore, there has to be salt. Ala shulchan, on the table. When you're eating bread, there's supposed to be salt on the table all the time. Again, to protect you, mean hayisurim, from bad things. Because the salt is the source of all severity and all difficulties. Alkain, therefore, humamtik, because it's the source, so it has the ability to sweeten up all of these severities. Because evil, bad, cannot be fixed up except from its source. You have to have the source. That's why we see a very interesting thing. Take an example. The Jewish people worship the golden calf, right? So they worship the golden calf, and they knew that God exists. God just appeared to them 40 days ago. Their souls jumped out of their bodies. So they knew God exists, and they knew that God said, the first two of the 10 commandments is don't worship any idols. I'm the God that took you out of Egypt. So they knew that God exists. They knew that God doesn't want idolatry. And they knew this, but they really had, it says, a tremendous desire to serve idols. And they were afraid, whatever it is. All of a sudden comes along Moses, and Moses breaks the tablets. And all the Jews say, wow, we made a mistake. We're really sorry. What happened? Moses didn't come down and say to everybody, hey, fellas, you remember what it said in the Bible? Everybody said, oh, yeah, wow, Moses broke the Torah. You figured everybody would say, Moses, wow, hey, you're one of us. Hey, okay, Moses, that's what we want to do is break the Torah. Right? We just want to worship idols, do whatever we want to. And the only thing that's sort of messing at us up with the Torah says you can't worship idols. So thanks, Moses, for breaking the Torah. No. Moses broke the tablets, and everybody said, oh, we made a big mistake. Wow, what's going on? Because Moses was connected to the source. He was connected to the source of bad, the source of good. He was connected to this. What's the source? God. He went up to Mount Sinai. He spoke to God when nobody else could go. Mount Sinai was from the Gevurah, was the power of God. He was able to go up to the source of bad, the source of selfishness, the source of everything. When Moses came down, everybody realized that's the source. That fixed everything up. So it says Moses, he came from the source of good and bad. Okay, and similarly, there is the same thing in the Torah. Where is there in the Torah? Now we have to learn the Torah. And the Torah also has in it bad and good. How are we going to fix this all up? A person can learn the Torah and he can go against the Torah. He can go against God. There's ample examples of people that knew the whole Torah. Yeravam ben Nevat and what's his name? Elisha ben Avua. And a lot of people that they knew the whole Torah, all of King David's enemies, all the ones that he wrote the Psalms about. These people knew the whole Torah. They were people that did all the commandments. They were super religious people. And nevertheless, they went against God or they went against King David. It's possible to learn the Torah and forget about the giver of the Torah. It says, therefore, we have to have the Torah. The whole purpose of the Torah is to fix up the world. So in the Torah is also this level of the botzina de kardanusa, this level of the light of darkness, dark light, mixed in together, the salt. So we have the regular Torah, and then we have the salt that you put on and that fixes it up, sweetens it up, gets rid of the potential for bad in the Torah. That's Chachmat Kabbalah. This is what's called Kabbalah, the secrets of the Torah. Higam came b'bechinas melech. This is also salt. Now we're talking about genuine Kabbalah. We're not talking about the Kabbalah Institute or something like that. We're talking about the Arizal and the Zohar interpreted properly. That's the idea of Chassidut. Chassidut, ideally from pupils of the Baal Shem Tov. Pupils of the Baal Shem Tov. And there's Sephardic Jews, there's other Jews that they really learn Kabbalah in a proper way. Anyway, the idea of Kabbalah is to explain the inside, the soul of Judaism. It's a thing you can't really understand what you're talking about. You're reading something and you don't really know what you're reading. Kabbalah, here, like we're learning, the Brutzina de Kardanusa, how God creates the world. We understand what that means. We know God creates the world. We know God exists. What ends in the middle, we don't see it. We don't understand it. It's not the same thing as you've learned the Talmud. You can understand, that if a person wants to buy an ox from somebody else and he has a donkey and you want to exchange it, so the other person pulls your donkey and you automatically take possession of the ox, even if it's in another country, another place. That you can understand what's an ox and what's a donkey, and you can the Talmud is talking about physical things, but here we're talking about spiritual things, which nobody really basically knows exactly what you're talking about. You just know that there is such a thing. That's called Yediyat HaMetziut. Shehi ba'atzmo nisteret. This is knowledge. You're learning about things which are concealed, v'ne'alam, and hidden. She'eino musegas. It's not understood. B'bechinas tam mamash. Kamo sheyesh lanu hasaga v'tam ba'niglos. Like we understand things that are revealed, right? You read in the Talmud what is tefillin. You know what tefillin is. You read in Kabbalah what is malchut of atzilut. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have an idea that there is such a thing like this. You can get a clear picture, but to feel it, that's the idea of salt. Even though that the Kabbalah itself doesn't have any taste, you can't really, but nevertheless, learning about these things and understanding them to the best of your ability, This is like salt, and it gives taste in all the other foods, even bread, even in meat. Shekol hagos olamos, that all of the conduct of all the upper worlds. This is according to the inside secrets of the Torah. But call the Torah and all the Torah, Nemra al pi Kabbalah, every word of the Torah is according to Kabbalistic principles. Again, we have to remember, God is the one that's saying the words of the Torah. It's the same God that's creating the world, but the Torah is the inside. And Kabbalah is the inside of the inside. Kabbalah. And the Cain, Gam Adam, also a person that learns the Torah, who Cain is also the same thing. Shamela, when a person learns Torah, so the Torah is like the meat, the salt, unoten tam, it gives taste in the bread and the meat. Torah is also called bread. Like it says, therefore, like it says, everything was made in God's wisdom. In other words, the whole entire world, everything that we see, everything we understand, there's deeper and deeper levels of godliness until it gets to the essence of God, which that's not a level at all. That's beyond the whole idea of comprehension. But at least that's the ladder of Jacob. It takes us up closer and closer to the truth and further away from our misconception of what truth is. And therefore, Gamba Karbonis, also in the sacrifices, it says, Lo tashpit melach. Therefore, it says also in the sacrifices, you should not omit, you should not leave out salt. Every sacrifice there had to be salt. Ki b'chachma is barir, because salt, that's like this level of chachma. That's the level of the highest of levels possible. And with this level, this high level, this is like the source of everything. As bariro, everything can be refined. And that's the whole thing of the sacrifices, is to refine the animal soul of the whole entire world. The Nikra Melech, that's why it's called the salt. It's called salt. Brit Elokecha. Melech Brit Elokecha. It's in this week's Torah portion. This is the salt of the covenant of God. What does a brit mean? A salt of the covenant of God. What is a covenant? Covenant means a very deep agreement, a very deep connection. Bechinet hitkashrut habora im anivroim, to attach the Creator with the creations. Was God is creating everything. God is giving us everything. What are we giving to God? God is He wants us to attach ourselves to Him. He's attached to us. If He wasn't attached to us, we wouldn't be alive. We wouldn't be existing. But are we attached to Him? That's the question. And that's the idea of Melech Brit Elokecha. The whole thing of the salt is to start changing the world, changing yourself, sweetening up this bitter, frustrating, confusing, disappointing world. That how do we attach ourselves to God? By doing what God wants. And what does God want? That we should change the world. He purposely made a world that has to be fixed up. To fix up. God made the world that we should fix it up. That's the whole Bible. God created the world, created man, so that we should improve the world. And this gives God pleasure. That's what it says. That's why we're here. I mean, that the fact that we're here, you can't deny. Here we are, right? Are we here for a reason or not? That can be denied. But if a person has a reason, so life is a little bit better. So the nature of people is, it's good to have a reason. It's good to have some sort of a, like, is there an ultimate reason? Is there an ultimate meaning? An ultimate, the Judaism says yes. There's the Creator. The Creator has, manufactures instructions. The only time that God ever gave His instructions to the world was the Torah. He gave it in front of 2 million people. The Jews, 3 million people. Jewish people are passing this down. Here it is, right? It has to be explained. It has to be, but most of all, it has to be, manifested is a better word. It has to be brought into reality. And that's what Chachma is Beriru. When we use the godliness in the Torah, that's the Chachma of the Torah. When we use that and look at the world from that point of view, then we can use the Torah and the ideas of the Torah to fix ourselves up. That's salt. That's what it says, that in the future there's going to be a war between Leviathan and Shorabor, between the great, what is it? The great whale. No, whale is not the good word because it's a kosher fish. Leviathan and Shorabor, and his fins. Also, the great fish, the Leviathan, and Shorabor, the great, what is it? The great ox, the wild ox. In any case, it says that the fish is going to slaughter the ox, and then the tzaddikim, the righteous people, they will salt it in the future. Okay, this has to be taken literally, but it's also, of course, much more than literally, because what do we care about eating a fish? That's the whole purpose. We're going to have the Mashiach is going to come, and then there's going to be the biggest prize of all. We're going to eat the fish. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. The fish, I can't believe it. That's ridiculous. That's what we're waiting for. So it says this idea of the fish is talking about the spirituality of the world is going to be salted. It's going to be made, we're going to see, it's going to be changed in a way so that it's palatable. Palatable. Anyway, that you could eat it. It'll be a thing we can ingest, taking into ourselves and live with. It's the secrets of the Torah. Just like today we live with pizza or something like that. In the future, Shehu Inyan, and this is the whole idea of Brit Melech Olam. That's the whole idea of this covenant of salt. Salt is dynamic, makes things move, sweatens. That's the covenant that God made with the Jewish people, that we have to change the world. We have to change ourselves by putting the secrets of the Torah, the inside. And these secrets are hidden in the future. That's this big fish. The meal will be Hasagata, will be able to understand these ideas of Kabbalah and how they are in the Torah, relating to us. This is a beautiful long mimer, but it's too long for us to really digest all the time. So let's skip. Skipping is not a good thing to do, but in this case, we're going to do it anyway. There's the secrets of the Torah. All right, let's take it from here then. That's what's written. And there was so much more. We're skipping a lot, but that we got the first point, and that is that the salt that has to be on the sacrifices, that's the secrets of the Torah, the secrets which are in the Torah, that when we learn them, that enables us, gives us at least a bigger picture, and it empowers us that we can get rid of the bad things in our personality, and we can not just get rid of them, we can even sweeten them up. Let's sweeten them up. And he says that's why it says that that in matzah, when you have matzah in the beginning, that you're not supposed to have any salt in matzah, because matzah is supposed to be tasteless. That's in the beginning. But then afterwards, there's a higher level of matzah, which is called matzot with a vav, and there is a taste. Then you can actually change. Let's jump. Also, we're going to learn later that the word for salt, we talked about that. The word for a melach is the same word for a sailor. A melach, I think it's the same pronunciation. Melach is for a sailor, and sailors churn up the water. And the same thing with the salt, it takes the upper worlds and the secrets of the Torah, take the upper worlds and bring them down, and the lower worlds and bring them up. That's what it says about Elisha. there's Elijah the prophet and his pupil Elisha. How they got this, I don't really know. I mean, I don't want to go off on this again, but it says that his Elijah is called Eliyahu. How they got from Eliyahu, Elijah, I don't know. But anyway, don't get confused. So the story goes, it's very interesting, by the way. Look over there, you should read it in English. It's really knockout stories. Elijah over there and Elisha, they're raising the dead. They're doing all sorts of amazing things, just fantastic. Elijah, Elisha. So here, one of the things that they did was that Elisha, he's with his teacher, Eliyahu. Elijah, okay, we'll say Elijah. So Elijah ends up, he goes up to heaven in a chariot, a fiery chariot comes down and takes him. And before Elijah goes up to heaven, so he says to his pupil, Elisha, what do you want something? I'm leaving. What would you like? So he said, I want double the power that you have to do miracles. He says, okay, if you see me go up to heaven, then you got it. And sure enough, a chariot comes down and he takes him away into heaven. This is pretty amazing stuff. And it says that Elijah, the prophet, what do we call Eliyahu? Eliyahu, a prophet, that Elijah the prophet, okay, that he didn't die. He went up to heaven in his body. What type of a body is it? I have no idea, but it says that he comes back for every circumcision. He's there in every Jewish circumcision. He's there. This is pretty amazing stuff. Anyway, let's read it. It's really amazing. Anyway, right after that, so the pupils don't really, the other pupils, I mean, Elijah had a lot of pupils, Eliyahu had a lot of pupils, Elisha was just one of them. So they're wondering if he's really the replacement. So they go to the city of Jericho, and it's a nice place, beautiful place to live, but the water was poisoned or bitter or whatever, poison. So he threw salt in it, and that's it. And he made the water drinkable. Like it says in the Zohar, and it's explained in the Zohar, Daf Reish Mem Hey, I'm based the Iu Memarek Umavasem Meriro Le Atma, that it cleans and how do you say improves bitterness to make it tasty. For Odye Shlomo, we can also say, because that's the idea. What is it? What is this bad water that was in Jericho? Shiroshem Nimshach Al Yedei Havdalah Shehivdil B'Mayim. This is a little bit of the water that remained when God divided the waters, the upper waters and the lower waters, in the beginning of creation. From this, because there was the lower waters, so there came down, so the upper waters, that's all the spiritual pleasures. And the lower waters, that's the physical pleasures. That's on the second day when God divided the waters. So this came, the possibility that there could be bad water that was poisoned, water that was whatever is Shem Mayim Aroim. This is what's called bad waters, undrinkable water. Like it says, a Mayim Ma'orim, something like it says that he gave to the Sota. There's the law of the Sota. They give her water, and this water can kill her if she was guilty of adultery. That the Mayim Amorim, they give her water to drink from the temple. Anyway, so specially prepared, and this water has the ability to discern if she's innocent, and she gets a big blessing. But if she was guilty, her husband accuses her of adultery, that if she's guilty, then the water has a big punishment. Look over what it says in Zohar, Chelik Beit, in Shmot, and etc., 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 etc. But that's what Rashi says over here, V'lo tashpit melach. Rashi says here in our Torah portion that you should not leave salt out. Shehuvtecha mayim tachtonim, that God promised the lower waters, the karev al gabi mizbeach. When God divided the lower waters from the upper waters, so God said to the lower waters complained, and they said, "What are you doing, God? Why are you putting us down here?" So God said, "Don't worry, God. You're going to be all the desires to do evil things and bad things." And the water said, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Come on. Why should I be the source of all bad things, all these bad desires?" So God said, "Don't worry about it. You are going to be offered up on the altar." How? In salt. Salt comes from water. And also in the holiday of Sukkot, there's the water pouring ceremony. There were two spouts on the altar. One of them had it's like two funnels, and one of them had sort of a big hole. And there they poured the wine every day. There was wine offerings every day they poured there. They didn't drink the wine. They poured the wine in there. And then there was the water offering that they offered up on Sukkot. So that's the water will be offered up. So that's the water good. But here we're concerned with the salt. That's what is the by means of the salt. And the salt was offering up on the altar every day. That by means of the salt that they put on every sacrifice, this elevates the lower waters. Water is pleasure, desires. The lower pleasures in this world, until they become living water. So this is the whole secret of what Elisha Elisha the prophet did. That he fixed up the bad water of Jericho by means of salt. That salt is the source of fixing everything up. Why? Because we said that salt comes from the source, this botzina, the kardanusa, the source of all severity and selfishness and ego and bad things in the world. Its source is really good. Its source is really good. It comes from God. This, by the way, is the idea that you're supposed to get so drunk on Purim that you don't know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman, because they really come from the same source. The whole reason that Haman is here, evil is here, is in order to fix it up. It's there to be fixed up. We have to correct it. So if so, it comes from God. So that's the same thing as the salt. The salt is the ability to fix up the lower waters. And again, what is this salt as far as our personality goes? That's learning a little bit of the secrets of the Torah, enough to know that bad comes from God, and it's here in order that we should ignore it and defy it and correct it. And the way that we correct it is by the fact that it forces us to do more good. It forces us to love God more in order to ignore bad. I mean, bad is how do you say? It's tasty, right? Bad is not tempting you from the corner. Some lady comes and says, "Come over to my house. I'll cut off your fingers." No, nobody's going to go. Well, that's ridiculous. Says, "No, come over. We're going to have a good time, right? We're going to do that to do a sin. Sins are good. Sins taste good. Sins are pleasurable, right? Sins are pleasurable. You have to have something very deep in your personality to withstand that, and that's what bad does. That's the idea of the salt itself is very bitter, but that's the defiance, power of defiance that you have inside of yourself. It's very bitter. But on the other hand, it takes away all these pleasures you can get from the world. It's a very bitter thing. But on the other hand, that's good. That's the ultimate good. From this comes between a living water. Similarly, we can understand this in our soul, in order that we could get rid of the bad water in our animal soul, all of our lower desires and selfish actions and deeds and thoughts, that we go after the pleasures of this world, that's called bitter. Like it says, in the book of Proverbs, it likens the evil impulse to a prostitute, and it says that she's dressed up really nice and she's very tempting, and her lips are dripping with honey, and but the end is very bitter. It's as bitter as, I don't know what it is, horseradish or something, lana. That's what it says. So how do you fix up this bitterness of the world? You have to have salt. Salt is the attachment to God, that God wants us to change the world, and He empowers us to change the world. Don't let the world conquer us. We have to change the world. That's salt. That's by means of the Torah. The Torah is called salt, especially the secrets of the Torah. Like it says, like it says that it will be a healing for your flesh. Even the lowest part of you, this is when God separated the waters from the waters, that even these lower pleasures can be fixed up by the salt. Therefore, it's called melach brit elokecha. Therefore, it's called salt is called the salt of the covenant of your God, because it's Elokim is severity. Kishorish adini, because the source of all the severity and the limitations and the bitterness of the world comes from the name Elokim. It's the same thing like we talked about this Botzina de Kardanuta. In Elokim, there are what's called 220 different permutations of letters that come down below until the Sof of Asiya, until this physical world. And from that, there is the 120 different Tzirufim. Tomorrow we're going to talk about this. I'll explain this. Of Noga, there's a letter by the Rebbe explains it. What is this 120 different permutations of this, that it comes out 2 times. 2 times this 120 is 240. With 240 is the gematria mar, bitter. 2 times up. And that's also the same number as Amalek. Amalek is also 240. Mar, bitter. And melach, that's the whole thing of Purim we're coming up to. This salt, in other words, the desire and the ability to defy bad and to even transform bad, this sweetens up the bad things in the world. Al Yadesha Mamshich Mishorish, because it draws down from the source of the bad things in the world. Like the Arizal says, Melach, the word Melach is equal in gematria 3 times Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei is 26. 26 times 3 is 78. Count them. 16, 18. 26 times 3, salt. Lochen, why 3 times? We're going to see why tomorrow. Lochen, therefore, it says by Aaron, Brit Melach Olam. By Aaron, it says that it will be a covenant of salt forever. Because the Kohanim, they bless the people 3 blessings. 3 times Hashem. Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha Hashem ponev elecha v'yochanecha. You saw Hashem ponev elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. It's 3 times the name God. That is the gematria of Melach, salt. That's 3 times God's name. Sheshorsham, that it's very, very high source, above the whole creation. And this is what the whole world depends on. That's what's called salt. 3 times the gematria of God, that this salt, therefore salt preserves things. You put things in salt, it preserves them. Even though the salt is very severe, the blessing for the Kohanim is also called the 60 powerful people. Gavurus Nasei, Parshas Peret Yud in Barabot, in Midrash Rabbah. That's this idea of Gavura. That's the blessing of the Kohanim. The Kohanim are really, they bring blessing into the world. That's kindness. That's like water. But the blessings that they give also have the ability to fix up the bad in the world. And this is what we're going to talk about, God willing, tomorrow. What we have to do, what it means that in order to come close to God, which is the korban, karov, you have to have salt, which means this dynamic and powerful power of defiance and transformation, that we can ignore the bad, cling to the good, reveal the good in our soul, and by means of that, then God fixes up the bad on his own. We'll talk about next time. Now let's do the Sikha of the Rebbe of the Devar Malchut. Beautiful things, very, inspiring, but on the other hand, it's very obligating. It's very demanding from us. So we have to understand that the whole world is being created by God every single instant, just for us to fix it up. Just for us to not follow our immediate impulses, to check ourselves out and to use with the power of the Torah for non-Jews, the 7 Noahide commandments, to fix up the world, to act properly, think properly, speak properly. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Now let's do the Sikh of the Rebbe.